Welcome everyone. We're at our last talk for the day. I suppose the last talk before the lightning talks. Last talk for the Power CMS room. The presentation is going to be by Murray Woodman, and he's going to be talking about CDNs, made simple, fast and cheap. Thank you, Murray.
Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for coming along today to Content Delivery Networks made simple, fast and cheap. Before I get into the talk proper, I'd like to paint a picture for you all. Imagine you've built a website, a Drupal website of course, and it's got great functionality. You're using all the latest features. The website is optimized and performing very well on the server side. You may have your block caches turned on, your page caching even, memcache, varnish. MySQL's running nicely. Basically, it's performing very well on the server. Imagine also that you have got great content. That's my idea of what great content looks like. You've got snappily written text, you've got great images and media, and it's all optimized from an SEO perspective. Is that all you need to do to have a great website? No, it's not. What you also need to have is great delivery of those assets to the end user. It's one thing to have great performance on the server side, but you must also consider how those assets are going to get to the web browser at the other end. Web pages are getting bigger and bigger over time. If anyone can remember, back in 1995, web pages were very small. They had an average of like 3 components, and they weighed in at the massive weight of 14K on average. I mean, in 2010, the average weight is around 500K, and there are about 75 components on the page, and that's only set to get bigger over time. So, of course, we have better bandwidth these days, but we've still got a lot of assets to download. The Yahoo performance crew have the performance golden rule, and that is that 80 to 90% of the end user response time is spent downloading all the components in the page, and that includes your images, your JavaScripts, your CSS images and whatnot. So it's not actually how fast the page is being created on the server side, it's how long it takes for all those components to get down to the end user, and that's what the end user sees. For you guys as developers, you may be concerned about the performance, but it's really the shipping of those assets down to the client that's the important thing. So today I'm going to cover the basics of what a CDN is and how they work, and I'm also going to cover some of the advantages that are brought about when you are using a CDN, and then we'll have a look under the covers and sort of see a little bit of the technical nitty-gritty of how a content delivery network delivers the content. I'll then have a look at how you select a CDN. I'll have a number of criteria that I'll assess CDN providers by, and we'll pick out one that looks quite attractive for an Australian audience, and then we'll just have a quick demo at the end if we've got time, just to see how all of that can be configured up in a Drupal website and to get it running. I've got a lot of stuff to get through, so hopefully I'll get through it in time, and we'll probably have about 5 or so minutes at the end for questions. But first, let's get on to the basics. So the definition of a content delivery network is a collection of web servers distributed across multiple locations, and that will tend to be around the globe, to deliver content more efficiently to users. And the way the CDN does that is it works out where that particular user is, and then based on a measure of network proximity, it will serve that content from a server that is nearest to that user. So if we just have a look at a very simple diagram here, you're probably all familiar with this kind of thing. You've got your website there, maybe based in the States or Japan, and then you've got you based in Australia. The arrows just represent the familiar request-response cycle. So basically the first request will be for index.php, and the rest of the components go across. When you add a CDN into the mix, these little light blue ones here are the CDN edges that are spread around the world. The CDN just picks the one closest to you and serves that up. So these will be all the images and CSS files that are being served there. And as you can imagine, that results in a much faster experience for the user, because you're not having to move the files, over the Pacific. So we've now had a look at a rough, simple look at how CDNs work. Let's have a look at some of the advantages that arise from using a CDN. First off, you have better scalability for your web server. So these are advantages for you guys as web developers. Sometimes if you're getting slash-dotted or you've got a spike in traffic, you're going to have a lot of requests being made to your server. With a CDN, that is going to be taking a lot of weight off that server. So all of the assets will be handled by the CDN, and your web server is just going to be serving the index.php from Drupal. So it will be doing what it's designed to do, and the CDN will take care of all the heavy lifting. But also in general, a CDN can just help out with the load on a server. As you're probably aware, a standard configuration for an Apache server is very RAM hungry. One process can take maybe around 50 meg, and that process is a very expensive thing to run. Those processes in Apache are responsible from everything down to the smallest space GIF, up to massive files or a standard index.php. So what you want to do is you want to load off all those other images, so it's not sort of consuming those processes as well. And finally, adding a CDN to your server or to your setup is a very cost-effective way of achieving this scalability. On the back of an envelope calculation I did, it costs 1/100th of a cent to serve a 500K page out efficiently to a user via a CDN. So from a cost perspective these days, it's a very strong case for rolling it out. Moving on to the user experience, of course, faster pages are going to result in a better user experience. Back in 1968, Robert Miller did some research into how users perceived, how users interacted with a system. If it was responding within 0.1 of a second, they considered that to be instantaneous. Up to 1 second, users still thought they were interacting freely, but as soon as you started to get beyond that, they were sort of unfocused on the task at hand and were just sort of concentrating on the dialog box. So according to this research, aiming for around the 1 second mark would be good for user experience. In another report done by Aberdeen, they were looking at the business metrics and how they relate to what users thought of a site when they were delayed by 1 second. And they found that there were higher loyalty rates, lower rates of abandonment, and higher satisfaction rates in general with faster websites. So if you're running an e-commerce site, it's very important to be hitting all these and, of course, serving the pages as fast as possible. Okay, also users expect faster pages. So yeah, 2 seconds is the new threshold according to Akamai. They probably would say that. But basically, if you're hosting an e-commerce site and you're getting up to 3 seconds, then there's a chance that users will be starting to abandon it. So it's basically in your interest to keep your users happy. All right. We've seen now the advantages of having a CDN. Let's just have a little look under the covers to see how a CDN actually does its work and determines where to serve the files from. In order to do this, I've got a little sort of demonstration site set up, and this will be used as a demo throughout the talk, just so we sort of know what we're talking about. I've got a site, God, I've done it again, based on in a Linode on the west coast of the USA. I've set up a CNAME there, which is based for that site, pointing to the CDN that I've got set up, and that's an Edgecast one, and that's my CDN. So they're kind of like the three moving parts that we'll be referring to in the talk. I mean, the important thing to note is that's just in the west coast of the USA. So we just have a little bit of a look at the DNS magic, that's what I call it anyway, as to how the CDN works all this stuff out. You can see my CNAME that I've set up there pointing to my CDN. And I've logged on to my a server in the West Coast, and I've made a dig request on the CNAME there, and you can see how that sort of resolves down, and it eventually resolves to this IP address here, 72.191.19. That server is based in the West Coast of the USA. I've then, at home, in my little house in Sydney, I've just made exactly the same request, and you can see that that resolves to a different IP address. So you can see that the Edgecast system is resolving to different IPs to serve the content. If we just have a look at some ping times now to these servers, once again from my home, I make a request to the actual server based on the West Coast, and you get a very, very slow time there, 234 milliseconds. But the other ones from Sydney and West Coast that are looking at the CDN, they come in through nice and fast, 14 and 8. So you can see that the CDN's picking out the correct IP addresses to do, and we've got fast times to both of those. That's the sort of the nitty-gritty of the IP addresses, but let's just have a look at sort of two types of CDN. You may well be familiar with these already, but we've got origin pull and push. Now, both of these, they don't really change the core of the way that the CDNs work. What these are based on is how we get the files up to the CDN. With origin pull, the CDN edge will request a file from the origin server, that's your web server, when its local cache is empty. So if a user comes along and makes a request to a website, and then it goes off to the, sorry, I'll say it again. If a user makes a request to a CDN and it sees that that file is not in the cache, it'll go, oh, it's not there, I'll go get it from the website, pull it up, and then it will serve it back to the user. In contrast to this, with a push system, the website is responsible for pushing all that content back up onto the CDN so it can be served. And in my opinion, like the origin pull is a much, much simpler system to set up because you're not responsible for pushing the files up. So part of this talk was CDNs made simple, so this is really the sort of method I'm pushing to use origin pull. So yeah, as I've just said, origin pull is easier to set up, but push does give you more flexibility with file processing. So because you're responsible for pushing those files up, you are able to process them. So it would be possible to maybe compress video or images or something like that before putting them up to the server. But yeah, as I say, that is just a little bit more complex because you need to keep track of what files to push. You've got your files directory, your contrib modules, you've got core, you've got to keep track of when those files are deleted or updated, so there's a bit more effort there. Another really, really cool thing about CDNs is it allows you to do parallel requests. So if in your spare time you've read the HTTP 1.1 specification, it states that a single user client should not maintain more than 2 connections with any server. So that basically means your browser, when it's making connections to download the components on a page, should only keep 2 connections open at once. And that basically means that you have quite a lot of sort of serial sort of downloads going on. But the way to get around that is, or one way to get around it is to use a CDN, because a CDN gives you another server to download from. And so if we visualize that, on the left here we can see sort of like the serialized thing going on where you make the initial download of the HTML and then it just blocks 2 requests going down. However, if you add another server into the mix and you can download 4 files at once, bang, it's a much faster download. So the idea is by adding a CDN, you get parallelized requests going on and a faster download. Research done by Yahoo and Google sort of recommend around up to 4 servers, but no more. After you sort of get 4 servers into the mix, things sort of start to bog down. So basically you can have your server and maybe 1 or 2 sort of CDN servers to help you out, and that will certainly help from that perspective. CDNs aren't for everyone. There are times when you won't want to use them. Just depends on your site really. These are sort of 3 approaches or problems that where you may not want to use it. The first one there is when you've got broad and changing content and the caches are getting flushed too often. Imagine if you had a site with, say, millions of images and they're changing every 3 seconds. Obviously that's not going to be something that's well suited for a CDN, because you're just not going to be able to get the reuse, because they're going to be expiring all the time. The flip side of that is where you've just got empty caches. You don't have enough traffic on your site generating these files to be, say, pulled up to the cache. In this case, no one's going to be sort of receiving the benefit of the CDN at all. And finally, if the audience is close to the server, then you're not really getting any of the sort of speed advantages. The CDN will take some load off your web server, which is cool. So that is one advantage, but you're going to sort of be getting fast response times anyway if the users are based around the server. So for our example that we're using, you have a web server based on a line node, for example. In the States, it makes sense, but if your sort of server's based here in Australia, then maybe not so much. I'd like to introduce the CDN module now. I mean, this is the Drupal part of the talk. It was authored by Wim Leers, and he's done a great job of getting Drupal core into a shape where the CDN module can work. The CDN module sort of works by rewriting URLs, so URLs for images, etc., are rewritten so that they are pointing off to the CDN. The CDN module supports both push and pull, so you're free to use either one of those, and it works in Drupal 6 and 7. With Drupal 7, there's still a little bit ropey in some places, and you may need to patch it up a little bit to get it working, but it's basically there for use in Drupal 7. There's also another component called file conveyor, which will push files up to server if you're using the push approach. However, when I've sort of tested that out in the past, sort of my experience with it was a bit patchy, and I ended up just sort of giving up on that and just going with origin pull, because that was sort of like an easier approach which worked for me. Okay, CDN selection. When I sort of thought about presenting a talk for Drupal Down Under, I thought, oh, what could I do? And about a year ago, I went through the process of auditioning all these different sort of CDNs to find out which one would be good for Australia. And it was a reasonable amount of effort, and I thought it would be good to bring that knowledge to this conference. I'm using a few criteria here: speed, reliability, cost, and no BS. The no BS component of that is quite important, I think. When you're dealing with a service provider, you want to know that they're transparent. You want to know what the costs are up front. You want to have good support, and you don't really want to have to jump through the hoops and talking to a salesperson and then working out what plan they can flog you. Anyway, that's my approach anyway. Looking at the speed first, we've got a chart here generated from, well, the data was generated from a little speed test for CDNs. There are two things measured here. The light blue one is the results for requests made to Sydney, and the dark blue is the average for around the world. So for us, I suppose the light blue one is the important one we should be looking at, although the dark blue for the world average is important as well. In Australia, there are three clear winners: Azure, Cotendo, and Edgecast, and Rackspace Cloud and Cachefly come in quite close, but really it is those top three that are coming in with a 100 millisecond response time for the 64K download. So if you were going to pick one of these, it would have to be one of the top three. I conducted this test about a year ago, and it was pretty much the same. I mean, a few of these guys may have swapped around, but basically those top 3 or 5 are sort of consistently the best performers in Australia that I've seen. Reliability is a second component that you can look at. All CDNs should be pretty reliable because they've got control over the IP addresses and DNS. If there is a problem, they can sort of fix that. And even though I don't have the charts up here, I have seen ping times for all of these CDNs, and they're pretty consistent over time. So I would say, as far as I'm aware, there's not much to pick between them on that count. Getting down to cost, this is a really interesting chart table. The ones in bold over on this side, they're the ones that support Origin Pull, and Azure and Rackspace clouds, cloud files, they only support push. So even though these guys have got good response times, they are only supporting push, but all the other ones have pull. Another feature I'd like to draw your attention to is just like the general pricing. These days, it's pretty competitive pricing for most of these ones, around 20 cents a gig. The Akamai one stands out at $4. I'm not an authority on this. That's just a bit of like hearsay I sort of read on one of the speed test blogs, saying that that's the price that Akamai actually quoted them to use their CDN. So, but it's difficult to get that price unless you talk to a salesperson. But all these other ones, they're sort of like the promoted prices that you will see on their website. Another interesting feature of this is just with the minimum monthly charge. You've got, $10, $99, $20. I just draw this to your attention because for me the Speedy Rails one is a very sort of cheap and easy, sort of low risk approach for users to get in and start using a CDN. So it's probably no surprise that the rest of the demo is going to be based on Speedy Rails, who is a reseller for Edgecast. So obviously they're a Rails sort of service provider, but you can buy these CDN services through them. So just going through the various benefits, we see that Speedy Rails have got, Edgecast has got a very good network in Australia. They support Origin Pull for simplicity. There's the no BS factor because they're competitive with upfront pricing, and it's a very minimal outlay to get into that. And also their support is very good. Every time I've asked a question, I've received an answer very quickly. I'm not getting any kickbacks for this, so but I have had good experiences with Speedy Rails. So it's time to have. I'm really getting through this quickly. We've got time to have a little look at demo setup and just how that actually works when it comes to Drupal. And so I'm just going to go through each of the steps it takes to setting up a CDN. So it is relatively painless process to do, so don't be too afraid of it. Once again, I'll be using the demo site here. Just remember that it's based in the States. We've got the CDN module installed, and we're using the Edgecast network via Speedy Rails. It's a very, very simple website that's just basically got one sort of image on it and one zip file. Yeah, so first off, go to Speedy Rails, sign up for an account. That's pretty easy. And then you'll get given an Edgecast account, so you are getting a full-blown Edgecast sort of account here that will be resold to you. On this screen here, you can see that I've basically set up a directory for what's called small files, and that's for that website there. The thing with Edgecast is they've got small files and large files. Small files are served out of RAM, large files are served off disk. Small files are a little bit more expensive at 24 cents and a little bit faster as well. Large files are for obviously bigger things like media files or zip files and whatnot. But basically, you just go in and configure it up like that. The cool thing about this is if you've got a whole stack of clients, you can just keep going in and making more and more directories for the client. So you can have this one account and you can then just keep adding your clients into it. Okay, we've jumped across to Linode now, and we're just sort of setting up a CNAME. I've got large here, but that could be small. So you're setting up your little CNAME there, pointing off to your CDN, and that's the configuration you make in Linode. This will allow you to have URLs with your own domain name in them. So instead of having this wacky domain name in all your URLs, you get to keep a bit of your Google juice and serve it out of a domain that's for your site. So that way, you could set up URLs like images dot whatever or video dot whatever to serve your stuff from. So you're still getting nice URLs using your CNAME. Then we're jumping back to the Edgecast screen, and we're just configuring this up now for to add a CNAME. So for that, say, directory, we're adding that, just configuring that CNAME up. So that allows Edgecast to know that CNAME is mapping through to that directory. And finally, we come back to your Drupal website. So the CDN for Drupal 7 module has been installed. We've set it up for origin pull, and we've got a number of mappings here. So you can see that for the small files, we're just picking out all the small ones, CSS and images and whatnot. And I've just got one example of a large file. I've just got one for a zip. But basically, you can set up however many sort of mappings you want here. So as I said, you could have one for images or one for video if you didn't want your URLs to look so cryptic. Okay, so we'll just take a little test drive, just very, very quick demo of the site. This is a Drupal 7 site, and that's the home page there. And we'll just go through to one page. We've just got one page. We've got the image that we'll have a little look at, and we've got the zip file down there as well, so we can just see how those URLs have been rewritten. Going on to the CDN configuration page, you can see I've enabled it. I've also set it to display a few statistics for you guys to have a look at how that's actually working. So coming back to the actual page, I mean, it's nothing too special, this demo, but clicking through, we can see that this image has been served from the small CDN CNAME, and if we just scroll down to the actual zip file, you can see, if I'll just mouse over it, you can see down the bottom there that that's coming out of large. And just having a quick look at the statistics, you can see the number of files that have been mapped there. A number of those are like CSS and JavaScript files. So ordinarily you'd obviously have those statistics turned off. So the purpose of this quick demonstration was really just to show how easy it was. I mean, basically once you get your account set up, it's just a couple of configuration options. Just wait for your DNS to go through, and you're ready to go with the CDN. There's nothing more to do if you're using origin pull. Okay, so just finish that little demo for now. And we'll have a look at the results. I mean, this is what we're all after. We want to see what actual results adding a CDN will give you. Is everyone familiar with Why Slow here? Let's do the show of hands. Hey, you've got to have one of those every talk. Hey. So, okay, you pretty much all know about it, but basically it's a plugin that will report to you on client-side page performance and give you recommendations. These are the Why Slow results I got for my simple website. You can see just a very basic baseline for that site came in at 75, and then by adding in all these other optimizations, we can get down to an end result of 99 out of 100, which I don't know how you get to 100, but that's pretty darn good in my book. The big ones that make the biggest difference would be adding compression to your files. So if you have mod headers and deflate installed, all of your sort of textual content will be compressed. Adding in your JS and CSS aggregation gives you a little bit of advantage, but the really big one is the expires header. So, but we haven't spoken about the expires header too much in this talk, because what we're concerned about is the time it takes for the first page request to go through, not subsequent page requests. Of course, once a user is requesting objects for the second time, that's going to be cached in the client. It's going to be super fast anyway. You can sort of set up a tiny little e-tag config thing, which may be of help in some cases. But yeah, here the basic conclusion is that a CDN will get you a pretty good score in Y-Slow. So that could well be the missing component for Drupal websites. Just having a look at page download times. It's not too scientific this, because we are just looking at a very simple page, but you can see that the effect that adding these different components in has. I just want to draw your attention that it's based on an empty client cache, so expires headers is not kicking in, and for these page times there is no page caching, so it will be a little bit on the slow side. But you can see that, yeah, starting off with a 2.5 second time, it gets reduced down to 1.32 after compression and a CDN is added. So that's still not amazingly fast, but once you add page caching in, you will be getting very good results back out of that. So that's basically it for the performance testing of the site. And most of the guts of the talk today. Just looking for the conclusion, I could have called this talk CDN for the little guy. I mean, when I started out on this journey, I was afraid that CDNs were going to be too expensive and too hard to set up, but I have found that there are options which are easy and relatively inexpensive to implement. So yeah, CDN for the little guy. Just recapping on the various points that we've covered. There are many advantages to having a CDN. It's good for you as a developer with you're taking the load off your web server, but it's also good for the user for a better user experience. In Australia, we have a lot of options now. For me, the Edgecast network works well, and we have a cheap way of gaining access to it. And after all, it's very easy to set up, as I hope I've shown. So yeah, if that all sounds good to you, then go forth and start getting a little CDN set up. My name's Murray Woodman. I work for Previous Next. If you want to contact me, feel free to grab me after this talk or drop me an email. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, we can do questions if anyone's got questions. We've got the mic. Oh, Margie, take it away.
Oh, yeah, I would like to ask one question. When you have the origin pull, how is it with the caching? I assume
yes.
You get it there, but it's probably not the same as a cache, because the copy on the local CDN node is kind of configured like your files, right? So you want to keep them as soon as possible, as long as possible, even though the caching headers can be actually shorter than you keep it, I assume.
The way I should have probably mentioned this. The origin server will look at the expires header on that, and that will go into. Sorry, the CDN will look at the expires header sent from the origin server. So when that cache is empty, it will go request that file, and in the response that comes back, that expires header will be set. So you set the expires header in your Drupal config, your HT access file. It's like set to 2 weeks or whatever as standard, but you can customize that up how you want. That expires header goes up, and that's what the CDN will honor. When that sort of becomes expired, well, then it's out of the cache, and then the next time someone requests that, we'll have to go get that again.
In that case, if you want to change the image now and it's already cached.
Oh yes, now this is another gotcha I should have mentioned. Thanks for bringing that up. I mean, this is a difficult thing, with expiring content, and it doesn't just apply to a CDN. It just applies to a normal Drupal site. If you have an image and that image changes, and that image is cached on a server, cached on a CDN or even a client site, then it doesn't know that file has changed. When the expires header is set, there's no even sort of simple little request up to see if the file's changed. So yeah, that's image will be out of sync for as long as that expires header is in operation. So The way you can get around that is to, well, it's very difficult as web developers, we've probably all run into this, you can't get out of it once it's cached on the client machine. So the way you can get around it is by changing the file name. So yeah, that's what you would have to do. So, but that's not something specific to CDNs, but it's just for ordinary web development. But for some of the people I've spoken to about CDNs, this seems to be the gotcha that they've all come up with. Actually, 3 people have mentioned it, is expiring data that they don't want cached. And it is possible to go into the control panel and flush out some caches if you want with wildcards and whatnot. So if you do make a mistake there, then you can fix it up on the CDN. But that's still not going to fix it up on the clients who've downloaded that image.
My question is around the use of the metric YSlow as a metric of seeing how well the user experience is. Have you noticed any sort of divergence between actual user experience by measuring the YSlow results with GT metrics versus Pingdom and Google Analytics telling you what the actual numbers are? And does the analysis that you did on using the particular CDN network follow through in that case?
I've got to admit, I haven't gone that hardcore on my statistics, correlating those two things. So yeah, I can't confirm that for you really.
What about analytics information?
I don't really know how to answer that. I know. Say, Google Webmaster Tools will give you reports on how your page is performing, in terms of sort of download time. So that's one analytical thing you can be measuring, say, through Google. But I haven't done any research on that, basically. Yeah.
Google's analytics, they've added the capability to tell you the end user experience on how fast a page loads.
Right.
Based on some. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. It sounds quite a difficult question. I'm trying to grapple with it myself. So fire away.
Google Analytics just recently introduced about 2-3 months back the capability to measure the end user experience.
Yes.
Through some sort of method. I found a lot of divergence between what YSlow would tell you versus these guys versus what actual analytics comes back for various reasons. So the question I have is which one is the holy grail to optimize to?
Right.
YSlow, is it analytics? Is
right. Okay. So Google Analytics have got a feature that will report on the end user experience and how does that measurement compare to YSlow. I mean, it is true that Google have got another speed testing service that does give you other results, and they're much more punishing on the criteria. I mean, YSlow is an easier one for me because it's easy to tick the boxes off and get it up to 100, but Google's a lot more sort of granular in how you've actually handled the individual files, and it will look at how much they've been compressed and things like that. So they're probably scoring you maybe on a bunch of other things that YSlow is not really looking at. So, I mean, YSlow basically gives you a checklist as a developer that you can sort of check off just to know that you've done your best effort. There's going to be other issues surrounding the actual content that you're pushing out that maybe Google picks up on a little bit more, but I couldn't really give you any sort of further information than that, really. Can we got another? No, there's a microphone back there. Yep.
Another gotcha that is there is if you are running image cache, you change your settings in your image cache, your images won't actually get flushed. They'll flush on your local server but not go up. So that one there has hit me a couple of times. My question is you said about the issues with the Drupal 7 version CDN.
Yep.
What are they? I'm about to start.
Well, it worked okay for me, but when I had to get that zip file working, that URL wasn't actually being rewritten. So I just went into the issue queue, and there's a patch there that hasn't been rolled back in as of a week or so ago. So I just had to apply that patch. So it's not running perfectly, but it's mostly there as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it's not perfect, but it's operating okay once you apply that patch. That's all I was referring to there.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to add what the guy over here was talking about with Google Analytics, that measuring the user's experience. I think that also takes into consideration the time that it takes for JavaScript to execute and for all your CSS rules to apply. So it's more than just pulling down of the static assets from the CDN and etc. So
just to repeat that, Google Analytics takes into account the page rendering time rather than just the downloading of the various components. Thank you.
You indicated that there was a point of presence in the CDN so close to Sydney. Do you know if there's any other points close to Melbourne or Perth?
No, the CDNs I've looked at, they tend to just have one edge in Sydney. I may be wrong. Akamai may actually have more. I'm not really sure, but the diagrams I've seen, it's mainly just Sydney. So that's, at least for Edgecast, that's certainly the case, and maybe some of the others. I'm not really sure.
Have you ever seen any misbehaviour on the CDNs, any failures, and or been aware of any notifications they gave you saying, hey, we had an issue at 2 o'clock in the morning, la 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 la, you may have had trouble with your site?
I've never actually, I've run Edgecast on a few sites now for a year or so, and I haven't been notified of anything like that, and other sort of reports, I haven't had any other negative reports in, so...
And you've never seen it? You've never
I've never seen it, no.
I wonder if you've ever looked at Cloudflare, which is marketed kind of as the CDN for the little guy with a bunch of security tools.
Have I ever looked at Cloudflare? No, I haven't, but do you know anything else about it? I don't really know.
Well, it's not, I've tried it, it's not very good in Australia, but as they expand, it promises to be a good CDN for the little guy.
Yep. One thing I'd like to add there is, interestingly, Akamai has partnered up with Rackspace Cloud. I probably should have mentioned that. So you can actually gain access to the Akamai network in a very cheap way. I think it was like 19 cents or something, but that was only with the cloud files as a file store. It wasn't as origin pool. But if you want access to that Akamai network and you're prepared to do the push technique, that could be a really good way to gain access to the Akamai network as well. You going to do a curly one, Mig?
No, I don't think so. I haven't looked at CDN for a while, but last time I did, the actual CDN module in Drupal required that you had to patch Drupal itself in order to rewrite those URLs. Yep. Is that still the case for Drupal 6? Does PressFlow take care of that already? And do you need to for Drupal 7?
Yeah, okay. So this is some of the really good work that Wim Leers did. So with Drupal 6, there were a couple of patches that you had to apply in various cases. One was, I think, for image styles and maybe for the URL rewriting. Those patches were pushed into PressFlow. So if you are using Drupal 6, please use PressFlow and you'll get a lot of these advantages without having to do any patching. The cool thing with Drupal 7 is that he had made 2 changes. One change was to change a lot of core so that when it's making all its URLs, they're all going through one function so that they're all being rewritten. So that means that all sort of URL making in Drupal is sort of going through one function and it's standard. The other thing he did, and I forget the name of the hook, but it's like URL alter or something, I'm not really sure, but it allows anyone to come in and then change those URLs. So basically we have a consistent way of making URLs and we have a hook so that you can do it. And all the CDN module is just basically uses that hook to rewrite that. So all that is in Drupal 7 as core, and you shouldn't have to do any patches or anything like that.
Just a simpler question. With Drupal 7, have you tried PressFlow? Are there any advantages for PressFlow with 7 over just straight 7?
Well, I'm not really an expert on PressFlow for 7, but my understanding of it is that there's fairly minimal changes that they've made for that. So I haven't used PressFlow with 7. Is there even a version of PressFlow for 7? There is, but yeah, maybe you guys know more about it than me. But yeah, as far as CDNs are concerned, it doesn't really make a difference. Anyone else? Okay, who's going to Who's got a CDN, by the way? I mean, you guys, you've all got one, yeah? Who's going to go out and try one? Hey, job done. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.